Hello, and welcome to Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. I am really trying to get better at this marketing thing, and everybody keeps telling me at the beginning of the video to ask. Please like the video if you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and you can also join my Patreon. We have a big goal there, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. I'm listening to you guys. I'm working on it. I know I need a lot of help, so keep it coming. We all love a Black Widow story. There is something so fascinating about women who kill. Most of us see women as the caretakers, the nurturers, and statistically, we are far less violent than our male counterparts are. But there is something I've learned as a true crime enthusiast, now YouTuber. The women who do kill are often much more evil and much more vicious than men who kill. More often than not, women who kill are killing their own family members, and many times they're doing it in very sinister ways. But this is no ordinary Black Widow story, my friends. This story has so many twists and turns and so many crazy characters that it's no wonder there is talk of it becoming a film. This is a story not many people know about, but I have a feeling they will in the future. Today we are talking about a Black Widow, a woman who, according to the world's standards, had it all. She had a rich husband, she was young, she had a man who loved her, and she had a family that she adored. But all of that wasn't enough for her. This woman was able to get men to do whatever she wanted. This is the story of Judith Singer, also known as Judith Barnett, a woman who had so much control over men that the police began calling her the man-eater. I'm your host, Stacy Lee. Let's get into it. March 22nd, 1980. Our story begins in Santa Clara, California. Friends arrive at this man's house. His name is Howard Witkin, and it's about 9:30 at night. Now, this is a hard partying group of friends, and it's common for them to get together for drinks and late night activities. But on this night, Howard didn't show up at the party, and that was not like him at all. Howard was a hard-drinking, fun-loving guy who never missed a party. So when he didn't show up, his friends Robert and Kathleen drive to his house to check on him. They walk up the steps toward Howard's house and immediately know something is very, very wrong. There are bullet holes in the front door, and there are drops of blood on the outside steps of the home. Robert and Kathleen go to a neighbor's house to use the phone, and they call 911. The Santa Clara police arrive within minutes and begin to investigate the scene. The front door to the house is locked, which the police find strange, seeing as how it's riddled with bullet holes. So they make their way to the back of the house and force their way in through a sliding glass door. The officers walk through the house, and when they come to the entrance, they find Howard. He is sprawled out in the entry of his home. He has been shot several times, and he is dead. Howard Witkin was a wealthy man. His family owned a large glass company, and he was next in line to run it. Howard went to school in Washington State, but once he got to college, his partying took over, and his schoolwork suffered. He was somewhat of a disappointment as far as his family was concerned. He had a large group of friends in Washington State, but in 1968, he went home to California to visit, and he was at a party and noticed this young woman who was having a good time. Her name then was Judith Adele. Everybody called her Judy. Judy was raised in a wealthy family in Detroit where she led a charmed life. She was slender and wore expensive, nicely tailored clothing. She carried herself very well, had an air of importance to her, but she also liked to party and have a good time, and because she didn't need to work, that's usually what she was doing, partying. Judy studied at Mills College in Oakland, California, and that's why she was in the state far from her native Detroit. She was studying religious studies, and it was no secret that Judith, like I said, Judy to most people, was not an ambitious person. She was in college because that's what was expected of her, but she didn't really have plans to become a professional after college. She wanted to have a lot of children. She wanted very badly to be a mother. When Howard and Judy met, sparks flew. People remember Howard being head over heels for Judy. Judy had come from an upper middle class family, like I said, but Howard's family was rich, very rich, and Judy liked nice things. Like I said, she carried herself like a movie star, and she wanted to dress like one, and she wanted to be treated like one. She knew Howard could provide that type of a life for her. The couple began dating, and after a few months, they were engaged to be married. The wedding was a lavish event. Hundreds of guests attended, and then the couple went off to Europe for a 3-week honeymoon. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But sometimes, especially with people who have never had to struggle for anything in their lives, happiness always seems to be out of reach. Howard finished college and did, in fact, take over running the glass business. A year later, in 1969, their first son was born, and Judy was over the moon. She had wanted so badly to become a mother, and now she was. The couple named their son Daniel and said it meant the little Messiah. Judy couldn't wait to have more children, but the next few pregnancies ended in miscarriage, and then Judy was told she could not get pregnant again. She was distraught for months, but then she pulled herself out of her depression and decided that she was not ready to give up. Howard and Judy found an adoption attorney, and soon they were the proud parents of a young girl, Marie. This is what Marie looked like then, and this is what Marie looks like now. Their family of 4 became very active in their local Jewish community and attended most of the events at Temple. For a while, everything seemed great, but Howard got restless very quickly. He wanted to continue to go out with his friends. He wanted to continue to gamble and drink and party. And soon, he and Judy were arguing almost constantly about the fact that he was never home. The arguments grew worse and happened more frequently, and then a miracle happened. Judy found out she was pregnant. She couldn't believe it, and she was thrilled. The couple's 3rd son, Nathan, was born, and for a few months, Howard calmed down. He started staying home a little bit more and partied less often, but it didn't last. Before Nathan was even a year old, the couple was arguing constantly again. The more time Howard spent out of the house, the more time Judy spent at Temple. And that is where she met a man named Bob Singer, a married man and father. Bob and Judy are on the same fundraising committee for their church, and they begin meeting for lunch to discuss fundraising events. They get closer and closer, and soon they begin to have feelings for each other. Their friendship becomes romantic, and by 1976, pretty much everybody but Howard knew about it. Other members of the synagogue spoke about the affair in whispers, and there was a lot of disapproval, but no one did much about it. Eventually, Howard became aware of the affair, and the fighting escalated. Finally, in 1978, Howard and Judy divorced. Shortly thereafter, Bob Singer and his wife divorced, and this did not go over well at the synagogue. The scandal is too much for Judy. The gossip is too much for Judy, and she tells Bob that she cannot stay in California. So Judy takes her kids and Bob takes his kids, at least part of the time. I couldn't verify if he had full custody, and they moved back to Michigan. In 1979, Bob bought a soup and sandwich franchise called the Onion Crock, and the kids helped to run the restaurant. You know, this is dining with death. I always have to check into the restaurant aspect of it. The Onion Crock still exists, but now it looks like it's a place where you can pick up like big batches of soup and sandwiches for things like parties or catering. Howard was back in California, living like a bachelor, partying most nights, and seeing various women. He thought he'd moved on with his life. Well, he had no clue that his life was about to be over. At the crime scene on the night of the murder, by piecing the evidence together, police construct what they believe happened. They think the killer knocked on Howard's door and then ran away and hid at the side of the house. Howard opened the door and then stepped out onto his porch to look around and try and figure out why there wasn't anyone at the door when the bell had been rung. As Howard stood on the porch looking around, the killer then stepped from his hiding place and began shooting at Howard. Howard then ran back inside his house and shut and locked the front door, and that is why there were blood droplets on the front porch and bullet holes in the door. That same night, when police searched the murder scene, they found a safe in a closet. So they called their safe cracking officers and had the safe opened up. Inside the safe was several ounces of cocaine and about $10,000 in cash. So now they had a whole new angle to wonder about. Was Howard involved in a drug deal that went bad? Is that why he was murdered? The police visit Howard's father, who tells them he has no idea who would want to kill Howard. He tells the police that yes, Howard liked to party, but he was friends with everyone and he didn't have any enemies. Howard was a fun party guy. He wasn't a mean drunk and he didn't do things that made people angry. Howard's father does tell the detectives something that sparks their interest. After Judy had an affair with Bob Singer and then married him and then moved away to Michigan, Howard had jumped right back into his partying lifestyle and was enjoying being a single man again. But after a few months, he realized he'd made a huge mistake. He missed his children desperately, and he was very sorry that he'd given custody to Judy and allowed her to move across the country with them. Howard had made the very important decision that he wanted to revisit the custody agreement, and he had hired a new team of attorneys to ensure he would get to see the children more often. Now, we see this all the time in these true crime stories. Either neither of the parents wants the kids, and then they grow up to be a serial killer, a la Jeffrey Dahmer, or both of the parents want the kids, and so they battle over them so fiercely that one of them ends up committing a violent act against the other. Many of you know what it feels like to have to share custody of your children. I do. I wanted to move away after I got divorced to a city that has an actual music scene so I could pursue my music career, and I even had a record deal offered to me. But I couldn't take my kids away from their dad, and I never even wanted to. I resigned myself to the fact that I was stuck in Utah, and I lost a lot of opportunities, but I'm okay with that because I wanted what was best for my kids. Too often in stories like this, we have a parent that doesn't care if the kids get to see the other parent, and that only hurts the kids. Unless, of course, you've got an abusive situation, there's always a caveat. But when one parent decides to take the kids and leave, and the other parent changes their mind after agreeing to that, we often see incredible violence. Children bring out the best in us, and sometimes they bring out the worst in us. March 25th, 1980. Detectives make a phone call to Howard's ex-wife Judy for the first time. Judy seems sad to hear the news that her ex-husband has been murdered. She tells the detectives that she's sorry to hear what has happened, and then they ask her about what they found in the safe, the drugs and the money, and Judy tells them that that was just Howard's lifestyle. In fact, a big part of the reason Judy left Howard was because of his drug use. This is nothing new for Howard, she tells them. Judy also tells detectives the drug use is the reason she doesn't want the kids around Howard without her present. So now detectives are starting to think. Howard has informed people around him, and most likely he's informed Judy, that he wants partial custody of those kids. He wants to see them more, and Judy has just told them she doesn't want that. She doesn't want the kids around Howard. So this could most definitely be a piece of the puzzle, a motive. Judy, however, she wants to send the detectives in another direction. She tells them to talk to Howard's best friend, a man named Philip Frandler. So detectives call Philip in, and after a while, he reluctantly admits that yes, he and Howard did sell cocaine and pot, but only on a small scale and only enough to finance their own supply. Philip tells police that Howard was in no way some sort of drug kingpin and never had more than a small amount of drugs on him. The cops ask Philip, "Who do you think we should be looking at for this murder?" And he tells them Howard's most recent girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie Brown, not necessarily her, but who she used to see. Apparently, Stephanie had an ex-boyfriend that was very jealous and who had threatened to hurt Howard for dating Stephanie. So they bring Stephanie in. She is crying and upset that Howard has been killed, and she tells detectives that yes, her ex-boyfriend is dangerous and he's also very jealous, and he's angry that Stephanie has been spending the night at Howard's. This man's name was Henry Brooks. Henry Brooks also owns a .22 caliber gun, the same caliber of gun Howard was shot and killed with. So then they bring in Henry, and Henry admits, yes, he does own a .22 caliber gun, but says he had nothing to do with the murder. He also takes a polygraph test, and he passes. Again, that's meaningless to me. You know where I stand on polygraphs. But Henry offers up his .22 to the crime lab, and they do a thorough analysis on it. It is not the gun that fired the bullets that killed Howard. Even back in 1980, they could tell from the striations on the bullets which gun fired which of the bullets. And this boyfriend's had not. This is the actual lab photo of the bullets, and you can see they are clearly different. Police seem to be at a dead end, and they begin to worry that the case may go cold. April 2nd, 1980. Police working the murder of Howard Witkin get a call from a detective in Flint, Michigan, the city Judy, Bob, and their kids are living in at the time. This Michigan detective wants to know, has the Santa Clara Police Department had any murders in the last month or so? And the officers tell him, yes, they have. They've had the murder of a man at his home. The Michigan detective tells the officers, well, I've got some information for you. I've got an informant in my office telling me that a few weeks back, someone asked him to kill a man in Santa Clara, California. The cops must have been over the moon about this. This doesn't happen that often. So the California detectives fly to Michigan to interview the informant, and they sit down to find out what he knows. The informant's name is Kevin McCarthy, and he tells them he is a restaurant manager. Kevin tells officers that he and the restaurant owner were talking one day, and the restaurant owner just kind of blurts out the fact that he needs someone in Santa Clara, California killed, and he asks Kevin if he'd be willing to do it. Kevin actually laughed and thought his boss was joking. When he said, no, I'm not joking, Kevin was like, no, I'm not interested at all. I'm not interested in killing anybody. Then a couple of weeks later, Kevin finds out that one of the busboys at this restaurant had taken a vacation. Where to? Santa Clara, California. The busboy's name is Gary Oliver, and Kevin knows full well he doesn't have the money to be flying across the country for a vacation. Not only had Gary been on vacation to California, but he was now flashing around a wad of cash in his wallet. Gary had even taken a friend with him on this vacation, a guy named Andy Granger. The next thing Kevin knows, his boss, the restaurant owner, is flying to Santa Clara, California for a funeral. Who is Kevin's boss, the restaurant owner? I'm sure you figured out by now. It's Bob Singer, Judy's new husband. The restaurant we're talking about is the Onion Crock. Police immediately call the busboy, Gary Oliver, in for questioning, and Gary says he wants a lawyer, so that shuts everything down immediately. Then they go to the friend that went to California with Gary, the friend Andy Granger. Andy, he's got no intention of going to prison, and he tells the detectives everything they want to know. He tells them that the owner of the restaurant, Bob Singer, paid Gary $10,000 to kill Howard Witkin, and Gary split the cash with Andy. They were each going to get $5,000 for the murder. Now, that's about $18,000 in today's cash. Gary and Andy got into Andy's gold Chevrolet and took his .22 caliber Marlin with them. They did not fly. They drove all the way from Flint, Michigan to Santa Clara, California. Bob had given them Howard's address. They parked about a block away from Howard's house, and then Gary put the rifle down his pant leg and walked to Howard's door. Can we talk about this rifle down the pant leg thing for a minute? I didn't know that was even possible. I don't know what kind of pants people are wearing, but remember the Clinton Avenue 5 story? That guy also put a rifle down his pant leg. And I remember, I think Henry Lee Lucas, some others. Is it really that easy to stuff a rifle down your pant leg and walk? I didn't even know this was a thing until I started researching these stories. But yeah, apparently there's a lot of guns being hidden down pant legs. It's wild. So Andy tells the police that Gary Oliver did just what they thought he did. He rang the doorbell and then he hid around the side of the house. Howard came out on the porch and Gary came from his hiding place and started shooting. Howard then ran back into the house, and Gary kept shooting through the door. So the police listened to Andy's story, and then all of a sudden, Gary Oliver changes his mind and decides he is going to talk as well. But Gary's got a completely different story. He said on their way to California, he almost lost his nerve and he wanted to turn around and go back to Michigan. But Andy egged him on and agreed to pull the trigger. So the cops then go back to Andy, their initial informant, and tell him, Oliver said it was you that pulls the trigger. Andy admits it. Andy says, yeah, I'm the one who shot Howard. So then both Andy and Gary Oliver are arrested and taken into custody. Police then subpoena Bob Singer's financial records and see that not only was Bob Singer not wealthy, like Judy believed he was flat broke and in a ton of debt. His restaurant, the Onion Crock, was failing and he owed everybody money. Well, who had money? Howard did. And he also had a life insurance policy that went to the kids if he died. So that's how Bob planned to save his failing restaurant. And this theory is enough for the DA. On June 6, 1980, Bob Singer is arrested in Michigan and taken into custody, but the case was far from over. In some ways, it was just getting started. July 1981. Bob Singer, Andy Granger, and Gary Oliver all go on trial. Gary Oliver turns state's witness in return for a deal and agrees to testify. Where is Judy during this entire thing? In court, every day by her new husband Bob's side. She is always impeccably dressed, very relaxed, chatting with Bob's attorney, acting very chummy with him, and didn't seem to be worried at all that her first husband had been murdered and her second husband was on trial for that murder. In August of 1981, Andy Granger is found guilty of first-degree murder and he is sentenced to life in prison. Bob Singer's verdict? A hung jury. One jury refused to convict Bob because, quote, he just doesn't look like a murderer. Oh, you gotta love the simple ones among us, don't you? You just gotta love them. So the prosecution had to retry Bob. He went back on trial, and in January of 1982, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Upon hearing this, Judy burst into tears and put on this big display of emotion. Minutes after Bob is led away in chains to spend the rest of his life in prison, Bill Melcher, who was Bob's attorney, and Judy, Bob's wife, hold a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. Bill Melcher announces that Judy Singer is going to attend law school. He tells the press that his firm is going to assist her because she has a brilliant legal mind and she needs to use it to assist the wrongly accused. A brilliant legal mind. The two also announced that they were going to write a book about the case and that they were entertaining movie deal offers. This is minutes after Bob is led away. So they make this announcement and then Judy promptly files for divorce and goes back to Michigan, leaving Bob and Andy to rot in jail along with Gary, who spends years there. 2 years go by and now it's February 1984. Everyone involved in the case considers it closed. But then the judge that oversaw the case, the prosecutors involved, and some journalists who had written stories about the case all receive identical packages in the mail from a woman named Leslie Bennett. Who is Leslie Bennett? She is Bill Melcher's secretary, Bill Melcher, the attorney who acted as Bob Singer's defense counsel. This is so crazy. I get in so much trouble for laughing, but it's so wild. This is such a crazy story. Leslie has been working for Bill for years as his secretary, but they have had a falling out. And Leslie is aware that she is going to be fired. So one day, Bill Melcher has to go to San Jose for business. And while he is gone, Leslie decides to rifle through his files. She's snooping. What does she find? You guys, a giant folder of love letters between Judy and Bill, her husband's attorney. Included in these letters are vivid descriptions of Lil Bill and Judy talking about what it's like to sleep with him. They're very salacious. People are so dumb. Well, word of these letters and this love affair between his ex-wife and his attorney get back to Bob Singer, who is spending his life in prison, and he is furious. He had apparently agreed to take the fall and keep his mouth shut. But now he contacts his new attorney, the one who's working on his appeals, and this attorney knows how huge these letters are for Bob's case. In case you're unaware of this, an attorney is considered a trustee. Trustees are not allowed to have any kind of personal or romantic relationship with their clients. The relationship is supposed to remain client and attorney, client and accountant, client and insurance agent. Anyone who handles someone else's money or keeps confidential information is considered a trustee. An attorney will get disbarred for having a relationship with their client. Well, I mean, they should anyways. They don't always, but this is a very big deal. Bob's new attorney files an appeal stating that Bill Melcher had a massive conflict of interest during the trial, which he did, and a judge agrees. Bob Singer is set for a retrial in 1990. Bob doesn't want a new trial. He wants a plea deal, and he's got a big old bargaining chip. The name of the mastermind, the person behind this entire event. Bob goes to the authorities and tells them that there is one person and one person only to blame for this entire mess, his ex-wife, Judith Singer. Bob tells police that Judy liked to tell people that her divorce from Howard was quick and amicable, but it was anything but. They fought incessantly, and Howard did not want Judy to take the children. When she did, he wanted to try and get them back, and he was going to try and force Judy to move back to California. Bob tells investigators that Judy had nagged him for weeks to find someone to kill Howard before the custody hearing in April of 1980. She said Howard had to be dead before that hearing, so she didn't have any risk of losing full custody of the kids. Bob said that he'd agreed to take the fall when he was arrested because he wanted the kids to be with their mother. He truly loved those kids. But after 10 years in prison and finding out she was cheating on him during his trial, he'd changed his mind. Prosecutors wanted to go after Judy and try her and put her in prison, but they didn't feel Bob Singer's statement was enough to do that. So they wired Bob up and had him meet with Judy, baiting her to the prison by telling her that the cops were trying to get him to roll over on her and put the blame on Judy. Well, Judy shows up, but she's too smart to fall for this, and she doesn't speak hardly at all. But she does make one critical error, and that is she doesn't really deny what Bob is accusing her of, because she believes that if she does, it will send him into a rage and then he'll start spilling more details. So even though Judy doesn't say much, her reaction is enough to convince the DA to press charges against her. Bob Singer pleads guilty to murder in August of 1991 and is sentenced to life with the possibility of parole. And now it's time to go after Judy. August 27, 1991. An arrest warrant is signed for Judith Singer. The following day, police knock on Judy's door to take her into custody, but there is no response. So investigators call Judy's father, who tells them that Judy took her son Nathan and left hours previous to this, and nobody knows where she is. So now police believe Judy is running, and a search for her begins. Police are concerned that she will run to Canada, where it will be difficult to extradite her. The police issue a statewide alert to inform all area law enforcement that there is a fugitive running from arrest. Then police get a call from Judy's current lawyer, Richard Goldstein. He informs the police that Judy is not running and that she will come and turn herself in. Judy actually does that, and in the summer of 1994, she goes on trial. Bob Singer testifies against his ex-wife, and even Judy's own daughter, Marie, testifies against her. When Marie testifies, she shocks the courtroom by telling them that years ago, back in 1986, her boyfriend played kind of a prank on Judy. So Marie's boyfriend called Judy and said to her, "I know who you are and I know what you did." Judy's response, How much money is it going to take for you to stay quiet? Marie's boyfriend was so stunned that he just hung up the phone. Even Judy's youngest son, the miracle baby she had after being told she couldn't conceive, testified against his mother. He says that one day he heard Judy and Bob arguing in their room, and he heard his mother say, "I want him dead, Bob. I want him dead." On September 20th, 1994, Judy took the stand to proclaim her innocence, but the jury didn't buy it. On October 4th, 1994, the jury reached its verdict. Judith Singer was found guilty of murder in the first degree with special circumstances. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, but she appealed that sentence. 17 years later, in 2011, the state of California was facing a massive prison overcrowding problem. So the governor decided to commute the sentences of nonviolent offenders who are no longer considered dangerous. This process took years, but in 2019, Judy was brought before the parole board in a wheelchair, suffering from lupus and a variety of other health problems. The parole board granted Judith Singer parole, and she was released. Her daughter Marie is very angry that she has been released. To this day, those involved in the case say they have never heard a word of remorse or seen a tear shed by Judy. Bob Singer was released on parole in 2009, and he died in 2018. Judy's current whereabouts are unknown. This is author Catherine Ellison, and she has written a book about this story. In an interview, Catherine said, "I've met and written about a lot of very scary people, but the only one that haunts me is this upper middle class woman who attended synagogue and had 3 children." The prosecutor in this case said of Judy, "I believe in true and pure evil, and Judy is it." Thank you for joining me today on Dining with Death, True Crime Tuesday. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you want to support me, and of course you can join Patreon. The end goal there is to raise money to donate to police departments that have cold case DNA in storage, but there's no money to test it. We want to help with that. We want that DNA tested because we want the perpetrator's DNA in the system. Of course, we also want to help close cold cases. If you join Patreon, you help support the channel and you will eventually help us reach that goal. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. I love our community here and I am so glad you're a part of it. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I'll see you next time on Dining with Death. Bye.